Hi, I'm Dino Loizidis and I'm a general dental practitioner. Today I want to talk to you about restoring a tooth when there is a removable prosthesis around it, whether that's a cobalt chrome or an acrylic denture or any other form of removable prosthesis. So let's look at this case here. As you can see, the upper left four has broken. There is a cobalt chrome denture which fits around it. Apologies for the poor quality of the photo. So how do we go about restoring this? Well, ordinarily what we would do is we would prepare the tooth, take a conventional analog impression with the denture in situ. We would then send that off to the laboratory. The laboratory would then process it all and make us a restoration and then send it all back. The obvious disadvantage with this is the amount of time it's going to take, and during that time your patient will have to be without their removable prosthesis whilst the new restoration is being fabricated. So how do we go about avoiding that, and how do we implement a digital workflow using, in my case, primescan, but the principle is going to be exactly the same with CEREC OmniCam if that's what you're currently using. So here we are in the administration phase. We're going to select the restoration type. We're going to leave it on auto detect. We're going to have a biogeneric individual, unless of course you've got a pre-op copy, but in which case you can use biogeneric copy. Copy and mirror isn't ideal because it won't fit against your chrome. I'm going to be restoring this with an Empress restoration, but again you can use the drop down menu to select the various materials. And in this case I'm also going to use articulation for the final restoration. Sometimes when using the articulation mode you will get this error telling you that there's a penetration that needs to be dealt with. This is usually due to there being extraneous data in the scans which you can then remove manually once you get into the edit phase, or you can just select the remove penetration and just carry on as normal. In the newer version of 5.22 this is a much more predictable process, and I just click ahead, remove penetration, and just crack on with the job that needs to be done. So now that we have selected articulation for our final restoration, let's just go back into indications and just double check we've selected everything. So restoration type, it's auto detect, design mode is biogeneric, and we're going to be using an Empress restoration on that tooth. We're going to be selecting tooth number 24, and once we're happy with all of that we just select the tooth so that primescan knows exactly what tooth we're working on. We will then go through the case details, just confirm what it is that we're doing, make sure we're happy with that, move on to the acquisition phase, and once that eventually kicks in you'll see the scans that we have taken. So again, these are the catalogs that we're using: the upper jaw, lower jaw, buccal, and gingival mask upper, which gives me a pre-op start situation, which helps me with my final restoration. And I always use a gingival mask upper or an extra catalog just to give me an idea of what I'm trying to restore. And you can see here, this is the pre-op situation of the upright 4. And when I come to design my new restoration that will fit in there, I will be able to use that almost as a template for my new crown. I didn't want to use biogeneric copy because it just isn't enough of a restoration there to be of any real use. So I've kept it just to give me an idea, and I've kept it as a gingival mask as an extra catalog. And when I come to restore it, you'll see how that can be used to superimpose on top of the design to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. So let's quickly whiz through the various catalogs. We have the buccal bite, we have the upper jaw, the lower jaw, and once we're happy with everything there, we can then move on to the next phase, which is the model phase and the design phase. As you can see here, the software has done a pretty good job of outlining the margins of the restoration. I would suggest that it's a very good idea to use some form of gingival retraction, whether it's gingival cord or gingival retraction paste. There's a number on the market. find one that works for you and stick with it. And you get much clearer and crisper margins than I actually have here. But for this purpose, this will do. Okay, I'm now going back to the setting the model axis, because although the software is very good at selecting it for me, sometimes I just want to double check it and make sure it's doing what I want it to do and it's where it's supposed to be. And here I'm just going to do some minor tweaks to it to bring the incisal edges of those two front teeth into the midline and onto the occlusal plane and balance everything out and lever everything out, just to make sure that I get a nice proposal. And then once we're happy with that, don't forget to click on the OK button, because that tells the system, the software, that you're quite happy with what you've done and it's ready to move on to the next phase. We're going to move on to the next phase here, and what you'll see is the remove penetration again, and this is due to the extra data that's in there. And if you remember the original scans, there was a lot of data in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and cut off any extra bits of data that really do not need to be there, because that just makes the software think these are either bits of teeth or bits of tissue or that need to be taken into consideration. And really the buccal mucosa really doesn't. Obtragates don't need to be there. Bits of glove don't need to be there. So it's a good idea just to tidy up your model at this phase. You just get a much clearer proposal, and it just makes life a lot easier for everybody. And again, just click through the various catalogs and go through and just remove these extra bits of data which do you no favors whatsoever. They don't add anything, they don't contribute anything other than just creating more of a mess. Once we're happy with that, then we can just move on to the next phase in the process. Just double checking everything, make sure we're happy with our various catalogs, go back to one of the catalogs, and we can then move on to the next phase, which is the design phase, which is what we're here for. The software will propose a very sensible initial proposal or restoration, and then it's up to us to go through a process of redesigning this and making sure it fits. This is pretty good, but as you can see, there's still a few gaps. So what I've done here, in order to make sure that the palatal aspect of the restoration fits against my chrome denture, I've reduced the opacity of it so that way I can see through the denture and onto the palatal aspect of the restoration. And then I'm just going to use my tools. Once I find them, here we go. I'm going to use my tools to adjust the palatal surface to make sure it fits against the restoration. The first one I'm going to use is the circular direction tool, and I'm just going to grab it and just pull it out. And as you can see there, it's starting to encroach into the metalwork. But that's fine, because what we can do is once we've modified it and adjusted it and designed it, we can then go into further edit tools and get rid of any extra bits, as it were, and make it fit much nicer. Okay, so at this stage, all I'm doing is I'm just using the circular tool to pull things out. I'm now going to reduce the opacity, and as you can see, the palatal aspect of that restoration is through the chrome. So how do we get rid of that? Go back into the form tool, use the smooth tool, and just smooth off that bit of tooth until I'm back onto chrome denture. And you can see as I smoothed it, it's reduced it, but it hasn't taken it too far. And again, the contact points, I just adjust as any other restoration. Just use either the smooth or the remove tool to get rid of any extra bits of restoration that are likely to get in the way. And that should give me a pretty good, well-fitting restoration. And it's a case of just rotating this and manipulating it until you're happy with the final result. And it's just a slow, methodical process, checking everything, making sure everything fits, making sure there's no extra contacts or heavy contacts or encroachments of the restoration that we're designing into the prosthesis that is there. And looking at this, it's looking pretty much okay. These little red dots are where the the restoration is just infringing a little bit on the soft tissue. Again, I've just removed those just for the sake of something to do. These, and again, just rotate it all the way around, make sure you're happy with it. There's a couple of minimal thickness issues, but at this stage, I'm not overly worried about it. And I'm just going to continue playing with this until I get a nice, predictable, good looking restoration that just fits nicely against my prosthesis. Okay, and again, just using the smooth tool to smooth things out so that everything is nice and tight without being overly tight or getting in the way. Okay, so once we're happy with that, just play about with it, tweak with it, and that should be it. I've just turned everything on just to have a look at the fitting surface. Make sure there aren't any areas which are problematic. And again, we can deal with these minimal thickness areas as part of the rebuild process. So just use the smooth tool and the add tool to add to the restoration. Just make sure you just get rid of some of the minimal thicknesses there. To be quite honest, I probably spent a little bit too much time on this, overthinking it, because they were really, really fine and small. And to be quite honest, I don't think they got in the way that much when it came to the final restoration, because that is quite a thick margin that we're sitting on. And again, just take your time, edit things, use your tools to design the restoration the way you want it, and make sure you're happy with it. And as you can see here, it's looking okay, but I think I've over-egged the pudding a little bit, because when you rotate it, you can see sometimes there's just far too much material. But again, playing with the smooth tool just to smooth things off just gives me a nice balanced restoration. And I think in the end I just decided to leave that minimal margin or that minimal amount showing through, because it wasn't that critical in the grand scheme of things. Sometimes you can just get a little bit too hung up on it and just spend far too much time tweaking little things which ultimately don't have a huge bearing on the final restoration. And once we're happy with that, then we hit the manufacture phase. Again, double check it. I've got the sprue coming through the palatal surface. Look at it all around, rotate it, make sure you're happy with it. Look at the milling surface, check for areas of under milling and over milling, and see and think about maybe going back and addressing those on your prep. Ideally, you don't want to see any areas of over mill or under mill. But again, I was quite happy with that. Select my block and click start. And assuming there's no last minute hiccups, your restoration will be done and dusted and ready to be fitted. And here we have the final restoration seated and the chrome denture fitted around it. Unfortunately, the second photo on the lower right hand side is a little bit blurry and fuzzy. I'm still trying to get to the hang of trying to take photos with one hand whilst holding the soft tissues and everything out of the way, so apologies for that. Again, it's part of my learning curve, so this should improve over the coming weeks. So I hope you found that useful. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions, drop me an email and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch and listen to this presentation. Thank you.